Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we sift through, stacks of research articles, different sources, and really try to pull out the juiciest, most insightful bits for you. Our mission today, to cut through some of the noise and get right to the heart of something that, it subtly shapes almost everything in our lives, often without us even noticing. We're talking about the hidden costs, the costs of performance-based love and how it kind of creeps into everything, our families, our work, how we see ourselves. So picture this. I'm sitting in a McDonald's just a couple of days ago, actually, grabbing lunch with my family. The vibe, usual chatter, trays clattering. And at the table right next to us, I couldn't help but overhear these two moms talking. One of them, she was practically glowing with pride, her voice just full of it, telling the other, my kid just got a perfect 100 on their English exam. Then she tells the story of her child, piping up all eager, Mom, can I exchange these 100 points for grilled chicken rice? And the mom's answer, just as quick, just as enthusiastic, sure, get another 100 next time and I'll give you more. And the whole thing, on the surface, it felt really warm, The pause.
It does sound incredibly innocent, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A nice little moment, a mom celebrating her kid doing well in school. But that exchange, that very simple exchange, our source material points out immediately, it's actually a really powerful, a vivid picture of this tendency we all have.
Yeah.
Deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
It's what we're calling the law of exchange, or maybe more directly, a work for wages kind of mentality. Mm-hmm. The idea that love or value or getting something good, it depends on you doing something specific first.
Yeah.
Performance. It's basically a transaction.
Exactly. And that's why it just clicked for me right away. This isn't really just about a kid wanting some chicken rice, is it? It taps into this core question for all of us. What are the unseen consequences? The deeper effects when love, success, our relationships, not just parent-child, but friends, partners, work colleagues, even how we value ourselves when it's all built on this, if you do this, then you get that kind of deal.
Precisely. And that's the mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore exactly that, how this law and performance mindset, which, often starts right there in the family, how it quietly but powerfully spreads into, pretty much every area of life. And crucially, we're also going to look at a totally different way, an approach that's rooted in what the source calls grace, unconditional love, basically, and how that can radically change things, our experiences, our relationships, moving them away from obligation and anxiety and always feeling like you have to measure up towards, real joy and freedom and genuine connection. It's a huge shift, really, a fundamental shift in how we operate.
So you can see the appeal of the if-then thing, though. It seems so straightforward, so efficient. Like if you're a manager wanting to boost productivity, you tie bonuses to targets. If you're a parent wanting better grades, you offer rewards. Even, in a marriage, doing something nice, hoping your partner will react a certain way. It feels like it gives you immediate, tangible results. Do this, get that. Simple.
It really does. That's the immediate pull, the seduction of it. Mm-hmm. It seems to work, right? Delivers quick results, makes things predictable. But, and this is the big warning from our source, once you really adopt this way of thinking, it becomes incredibly hard to let go of. It's like it gets wired in, it looks effective short term, but it leads to these unforeseen negative consequences, is the phrase used, things that pop up later, maybe years later. We don't understand why. We wonder why our systems, our relationships feel strained or empty, why there's resentment. We get dependent on that feeling of control it gives us. And
one of the starkest examples the source gives is that direct link, almost undeniable, between this kind of law-based upbringing and teenage rebellion. For any parents listening, that's a pretty clear takeaway, isn't it? It suggests that when kids hit those, turbulent adolescent years, they're acting out, their defiance, it might not just be a phase. It could actually be a direct response, like an outcry against years of conditional love, of always having to perform to get approval.
Right. That's such a critical point, because parents often feel completely lost. They asked, why are they acting like this? We gave them everything. What went wrong? Mm-hmm. And the source really emphasizes they often just don't realize that this rebellion, this pushing back, it's actually a byproduct of the law. Mm-hmm. It's the natural, maybe painful, but natural outcome of growing up in a system built on conditions, rules, constant evaluation. Imagine living under that pressure constantly. Eventually, something's got to give, right? That urge to break free, to just be yourself without judgment, it becomes overwhelming. It's less about being bad, more about a desperate need for acceptance, for real autonomy.
Yeah, that really connects with this quite moving personal story shared in the source about the speaker growing up pretty introverted and always being seen as rude around relatives. Yeah. The speaker says they were naturally pretty cheerful, actually liked people, wanted to connect. But around relatives, they just clam up, become silent, almost cold. It's like this deep internal conflict, right? They wanted to be polite, but just couldn't.
Oh, absolutely. A very common thing, especially for sensitive kids. And the parent in this story would often introduce the child saying things like, "Oh, he's always ill-mannered," or even, "Who does he take after? I just don't get it." And the pressure just built, didn't it? Before visits, it was constant reminders. Say hello, remember to say thank you, be polite. But these weren't gentle suggestions. They were commands. Expectations. And the result, just this crushing inability to do it, to perform on cue, followed by the inevitable criticism afterwards. "See, I told you to say hello. You just sat there looking like someone owed you money." But the speaker in the source makes it clear it wasn't anger on their part. It was this feeling of being constrained, like physically unable to speak the words, even though inside they wanted to.
And this is just crucial for understanding how this law works, that desire inside the child to connect, to be polite, maybe even express affection. It was there, but it was being forced by an external rule, a demand. It wasn't flowing naturally from inside. And this points to a bigger truth, really. All our human morality, our rules, etiquette, social norms, fundamentally, they're all attempts to express love or connection or right behavior. But if genuine unforced love isn't the root, these demands become hollow, a performance. And that's incredibly hard for children who are often much more authentic, less filtered than adults. They struggle to fake it. They can't just conjure up a feeling on command.
Which leads to this really interesting, almost paradoxical idea the source brings up from the Bible, from Romans, this idea of sinful passions aroused by the law leading to fruit for death. It sounds complex, but it suggests this deep irony, right? That demanding performance, imposing rules without that foundation of unconditional love, it doesn't just fail, it actually stirs up the opposite. Resistance, defiance, a kind of relational decay, a deathly fruit.
Exactly. And if you loop that back to the mom in McDonald's, her pride, her thinking she found a good way to discipline her child with rewards, well, she's actually, maybe without realizing it, cultivating this very performance mindset. It's not nurturing a genuine love for learning or a deep sense of security in the relationship. It's subtly teaching. Your value, your grilled chicken rice, it depends on your score. And that creates this internal landscape where resentment can grow, burnout happens easily, self-worth feels fragile. It can even erode trust because the child starts wondering, is the love real or just a payment for doing well? The completely contrasting idea, the countercultural truth we're exploring, is so simple but revolutionary. Baby, you don't need 100 points for grilled chicken rice. We provide for you because we love you, period, not because of what you did. That's the huge paradigm shift. It just flips the whole script.
You know, going through the source material, this next point really, it really stopped me in my tracks. The idea that this law mentality, it's not just a personal thing. It actually spreads. It's contagious. The speaker talks about their own childhood, constantly striving for rewards, like a new little overlord learning machine. Remember those? Or getting pocket money for a perfect score. And it created this feeling of being, well, slave-like. You might have loving parents, but we're living like a servant, always driven by the next reward, constantly measuring up, performing.
And what's really disturbing is how this cycle just keeps going. We learn this system, this if-then way of thinking very quickly, from parents, teachers with their sticker charts, bosses with performance reviews tied to pay rises. And then, often without even thinking about it, we turn around and apply the exact same logic to our own kids, our friends, the people we manage. That's why the source connects it to bigger societal problems, like reports of, say, teachers being violent. It suggests it's part of a cycle where, as the saying goes, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. This law-based thinking spreads like an infection through families, schools, workplaces, creating these environments of pressure and conditional acceptance.
But the crucial insight here is also really hopeful, isn't it? When any of us feel truly loved, unconditionally loved, they gain strength. Real strength. This deep, secure love, not performance. That's what builds genuine confidence, resilience, freedom. The speaker shares how feeling deeply loved, attributing it to a divine source, in their case, allows them to interact freely, even with people who misunderstand or criticize them, without getting bitter or defensive.
It's like that analogy of feeling like nobility. When you genuinely know your worth, when you have this inner security that doesn't depend on what others think or say, you don't feel the need to get down in the mud and argue with someone insulting you. You might feel pity for them, for their own struggles, but you're not pulled into their bitterness. And this inner confidence, it allows for adventure, for trying new things without that crippling fear of failure that the law imposes. The law keeps you chained by fear of not measuring up, fear of judgment. Grace, though, it frees you. frees you to explore, create, to just be without that constant weight.
And speaking of fear and performance, there's another really vivid memory from the source that just perfectly captures how this law-based thinking can steal joy, even from something simple like a photo. The speaker looked back at childhood pictures and noticed something odd. Even though they were naturally a happy kid and lots of photos, their forced smiles looked more like they were about to cry. Such a powerful image of that inner conflict.
It's so telling, isn't it? And the reason? Because someone was always saying, smile. Come on, smile. Why aren't you smiling? The source points out, telling a quick joke, doing something genuinely funny to elicit a smile would have worked much better than demanding one. And that just perfectly shows how the law, the external command, insists on the outcome, the smile, without nurturing the inner state, the actual happiness that should create it. It's like trying to force a flower open instead of giving it sun and water.
It's exactly like trying to force kids to share without helping them feel generous first. You hand them a pear and say, give that to your brother, but you six the part about why sharing is good or helping them feel like they have enough to give away freely.
Exactly. Children share naturally when they feel secure, when they feel loved, when they feel they have plenty, when they know things are freely given to them. The source mentions their own child, who, after just a couple of bites of something yummy, immediately offers it to mom or dad. Spontaneously. No one taught him, the source says. It's a beautiful example of freely received, freely given. If we believe everything we have was earned through struggle, through performance, we'll cling to it, won't we? We'll hoard it, resent giving it away because we're operating from scarcity. But when we experience true abundance, freely given, generosity becomes almost effortless.
This insight leads us perfectly into our next section. We're going deeper into the parable of the prodigal sons, looking beyond the usual story at the entitlement and bitterness that can grow under the law. So we're setting the scene with that famous story from Luke 15, often just called the prodigal son, usually focusing on the younger son who comes back.
But our source points out something really crucial, a layer that often gets missed. It says, in this story, there is another prodigal son, his older brother. But his older brother never truly turned back.
Yeah.
Now, that's a challenging thought, isn't it? This older brother figure, the source suggests, often represents those of us who follow all the rules, who do everything right on the outside. But paradoxically, remain emotionally or spiritually distant, lost in our own sense of duty and righteousness, never really experiencing the joy of belonging, prodigal in a different way.
And the older brother's reaction when he comes in from the fields and hears the party for his younger brother, that complaint really gets to the absolute core of this law-based mindset. He gets angry, refuses to even go inside, and then confronts his father, basically laying out his case. Look, all these years I've slaved for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even one young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. He's definitely keeping score.
Oh, absolutely. He has a detailed ledger in his head, and the source really hammers this point home. If you don't understand the mystery of grace versus law, this, meaning the older brother's complaint, is very likely what your child, or maybe even you yourself, will say about life, about God, about relationships. It's rooted in this deep sense of entitlement, a feeling of unappreciated work, unrewarded obedience. He genuinely believes he has earned something through his years of dutiful service, something he feels he's been denied. And then comes that bitter comparison, the real sting. But when this son of yours, notice the distancing language, who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. It's classic resentment seeing someone else, especially someone perceived as less deserving, get something good and feeling utterly cheated.
What's also really interesting is his specific desire, so I could celebrate with my friends. Even while he's physically there, working on his father's estate, his heart seems to be elsewhere. It suggests he wasn't finding joy in the relationship with his father or the life he had. He was looking for external validation, maybe status among his peers, achieved through his own efforts. He was present, but not really with his father in spirit.
That connects directly to so many real-world situations, doesn't it? People chasing relationships for money or status, or kids who only seem interested in wealthy parents because they're focused on the inheritance, a kind of superficial love masking deeper transactional motives. Now, we often just blame this on, human depravity or selfishness. But the source pushes us. Have we ever stopped to reflect on what causes all this? Often it suggests it's the law-based thinking itself that unintentionally stimulates his evil desires. By highlighting what's forbidden or what has to be earned through effort, the law can paradoxically make us want those things more intensely or feel we deserve more because it fosters that scarcity mindset. the constant need to prove our worth or acquire things. It turns relationships into deals.
And the really devastating outcome of living this way, under this law-based thinking, the source highlights something stark. The first characteristic of being full of bitterness is what? Cannot stand to see others do well. That really cuts deep, doesn't it? A deep-seated resentment that just poisons everything.
It's a truly corrosive internal state. The source gives an example from a news report. A brother and sister, apparently close for years, fighting fiercely over their inheritance. Why? Because the father gave them different amounts when they got married. And immediately, that work for wages thinking flares up. Wait, I did this much. I was always there. Why did they get more? It's not fair. It creates this sense of injustice, a seemingly legitimate reason for conflict, but often masking those deeper issues: comparison, self-worth tied to external rewards, and ultimately just raw bitterness.
And the source makes it clear this isn't just about families and money. This applies equally in the church, in ministry, in any organization, really. If our motivation for serving, for participating, is getting some kind of wage, whether that's recognition, influence, status, or even feeling spiritually superior, we will always find reasons to complain. It's inevitable. I sacrificed so much. Why didn't I get that position? Or why isn't my life turning out the way I expected after all I've done?
It leads to this kind of spiritual scorekeeping, an internal balance sheet where we're constantly weighing our efforts against what we think we should be getting back, like the medical analogy the source uses. I've been so dedicated, prayed so hard. Why isn't my illness healed? But look at him. He just showed up a few weeks ago and he got healed. Why him? He didn't do nearly as much as me. The crucial insight here, the thing this thinking completely misses, is that all blessing, all healing, all true value, it doesn't come from our work or merit. It's freely given. We receive everything because of what was freely given, not because of what we did. When a whole group understands that, believes that everyone is a recipient of unconditional generosity, then you can have real unity, real joy. The comparisons just fall away.
Which leads beautifully into that core teaching from Jesus, the new commandment from John's Gospel: love one another. Now, if grace is the answer, if everything good is freely given, why is this seemingly simple command so incredibly hard for us? Why do we struggle so much to actually live it out?
Well, the source suggests we struggle because, fundamentally, we don't understand the fact that we don't have this kind of perfect self-generating love within us. Genuine, unconditional love, the kind that flows freely without expecting anything back. It really only happens consistently when both people are looking beyond themselves, looking to Christ, as the source puts it, or looking towards some shared higher ideal of unconditional love. Otherwise, one person's attempts at love inevitably bump up against the other person's fears, their self-judgment, their own bitterness. It makes real, deep connection incredibly difficult, often impossible. The source gives a lovely marital example. My wife and I have a wonderful testimony. The secret is simple. We are both looking at Jesus. The moment they start focusing only on each other's flaws or on their own performance in the marriage, problems and judgment inevitably creep back in. It's about shifting focus from the imperfect human to a perfect external source of love.
It reminds me of that principle from the Psalms: the wicked will not stand in the assembly of the righteous. But this source offers a different interpretation here. It's not necessarily about outward behavior in a simple sense. It's about the source of your sense of worth. Are you justified by works, believing your value comes from what you achieve, how well you follow the rules? Or are you justified by faith, believing your worth is inherent, a gift, regardless of performance? The source argues that those focused on works will always be judging others.
And here's the really profound paradox. Those judgmental individuals, the ones always focused on works and performance, will often self-depart from communities, from relationships, from groups. They'll leave convinced that everyone else is unspiritual or not measuring up, and in doing so, they unknowingly fulfill that very scripture. It's not about being kicked out. It's a self-imposed exile, driven by their own need to compare, judge, and find fault because they can't rest in grace. True community, true belonging, it can only really flourish when people understand and accept that their worth and everyone else's is freely given. That removes the whole basis for comparison and judgment.
What's also just so powerful in the parable is the father's response, his unwavering grace, that loving reply to the older son who's just dripping with resentment. My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours.
It shows the father's love, his attitude. It never changed. It was constant. The older son just didn't realize it. He was stuck operating under a complete misunderstanding of his relationship with his father, his inheritance, his standing. And this challenges those common ideas many hold, that God or the universe sends illness or misfortune as direct punishment for specific bad actions. The source emphasizes God's tolerance, his immense patience. If every wrong action prompted immediate act of judgment, well, as the source humorously notes, people engaging in things considered wrong daily would be constantly getting struck by lightning. But that's not how it works. Grace and patience are extended broadly.
So the argument is that many bad things happening aren't necessarily God's active punishment, but more like the passive natural consequences built into the world, cause and effect. Like if you jump off a building, you fall. That's gravity. It's not necessarily God actively judging the jump in that instant, but the natural law taking effect. Understanding that distinction is key.
Exactly. Too many people still see God, or life, like the older son saw his father. If I mess up, you'll punish me. If I do well, you'll reward me. But the Father's message is radically different. Everything I have is already yours. It always has been. The source points to Galatians, where it says an heir, even though they legally own everything, is basically treated like a slave while they're still a child, under guardians and managers. This means many people, though perhaps spiritually heirs to incredible grace, remain like spiritual infants. They live like slaves under the law, unable to actually receive and enjoy the fullness of what's theirs, because they're still trying to earn it instead of simply accepting it as a gift. They're stuck in performance mode when they've already been welcomed into a family of grace.
Which brings us neatly to our next section. Looking at Martha's burden versus Mary's best portion, really digging into the tyranny of performance. This is from that other well-known story in Luke, right? Jesus visits the home of Martha and Mary. And Martha gets totally distracted by much serving, running around stressed out. Eventually, she complains to Jesus about her sister Mary, who's just sitting at his feet listening. "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me."
Right. And the source points out the really subtle but crucial distinction here. Martha's problem wasn't the serving itself. Hospitality, service, those are good things. Her problem was the internal state it produced in her, the anxiety and worry. She was zealous. Absolutely. Wanted to do good things, but as Romans puts it, her zeal was not according to knowledge. She was trying to find rest, peace, satisfaction through her own intense effort and performance, which paradoxically led to internal turmoil and exhaustion.
And the deeper read on this from the source is that Martha genuinely wanted to do better. She wanted to be the perfect host, probably felt responsible, but she felt overwhelmed, unable to do it all alone. And this feeling of inadequacy, combined with that performance mindset, it just spiraled into negative emotions, complaint, bitterness, and self-blame. She ends up blaming Mary for not helping and even implicitly blames Jesus. "Don't you care? It's your fault she's not helping," which is such a classic sign of someone operating under the pressure of the law, always finding someone else to blame when things don't meet their expectations.
It's such a powerful link because the source connects this directly to people still stuck in that law-based thinking. They often, internally or even outwardly, kind of curse those of us who preach grace. They might secretly hope things go wrong for people living by grace, to prove their own rule-based system is better, safer. They expect failure from grace. But the paradox is, those living in grace often end up living better and better. They find more freedom, more joy, more effectiveness. It's this stark contrast that really highlights the counterintuitive freedom that comes from letting go of performance and just embracing acceptance.
And Jesus' response to Martha, it's just full of kindness, isn't it? No condemnation. He says, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." He gently redirects her, doesn't shame her for serving, but points out the anxiety, the worry that came with it.
It perfectly shows Jesus' attitude, which is so consistent with the father in the Prodigal Son story, loving even those who are still caught in the struggle, under the burden of the law. Martha's core issue was that zeal without knowledge. She was trying to achieve rest, not by simply being present and receiving like Mary was, but through doing more, through her own efforts. She thought rest was the reward for hard work, when Jesus was showing that resting in his presence, in grace, is the foundation for joyful, effective work.
And this whole idea of rest, it's such a struggle for so many of us listening. You hear that and think, rest, how? I have to work, I have bills to pay, responsibilities, kids, deadlines. It can feel like a complete luxury, something totally impractical for busy modern life. Sounds nice, but impossible.
But the source clarifies this really well. Rest isn't primarily about stopping work. It's not about being idle or dropping your responsibilities. It's a transformation of your mindset, a deep internal shift. Your reason for working, for doing things, for connecting, It changes. It moves from external pressure and obligation to internal peace and maybe even joy. That work for wages mentality, the constant striving, it actually strips the joy out of working because the work itself just becomes a means to an end, a bitter chore, as the source puts it. You're only doing it for the wage, whether that's money, approval, security, whatever, not for any inherent satisfaction or purpose in the activity itself.
That clicks immediately with something an education expert noted in the source. Kids naturally love learning. They're born curious explorers, asking why, finding joy in figuring things out. But that natural joy gets eroded. How? When people, usually adults, constantly instill in them why they're learning, focusing only on the external payoff, or when teachers frame learning as a bitter chore you just have to get through, or when parents start promising rewards, that gaming console, the grilled chicken rice just for hitting certain scores.
That's exactly where the shift happens, where the poison of the law gets in. Learning stops being about the joy of discovery itself and becomes purely about the goal behind it, the grade, the prize, the parental approval, and the actual process of learning. It becomes boring beyond compare. It feels unworthy of the effort because the intrinsic motivation is gone, replaced by an external one. The child isn't learning for learning's sake anymore. They're learning for the reward. And once they get the reward, often the joy just vanishes, leaves them feeling kind of empty.
That really resonates. The source shares this personal story about studying for a master's degree entrance exam, super intense, half a year of just relentless studying, aiming for a top 10 spot in a competitive program, and they did it. Got in, ranked high.
But the outcome, the feeling afterwards, was surprising, almost heartbreaking. The speaker says, honestly, at that moment, I had no joy whatsoever. The analogy they used was like changing from really tight shoes into slightly less tight shoes. Still uncomfortable, still a burden, just maybe a tiny bit lighter. Why? Uncomfortable because too much was invested. Too much self, too much striving, too much pressure to prove worth through achievement. There was no space left for genuine enjoyment. Well, yes, but not that deep, satisfying joy. Because the motivation was all external, performance-based.
So it seems like this work for wages mindset just leads to this constant cycle of comparison and complaint. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are, rich, poor, successful, struggling, you can always find a reason to feel slighted, unfulfilled. Someone else got more for less effort, or the reward didn't match the struggle, or you reached the goal but the happiness didn't last.
Exactly. You're always measuring your work against your perceived wage, your input versus the output or reward. And it's an endless, dissatisfying calculation. The solution offered by the source is radical. It's to turn to a source of unconditional love, whatever that means for you, and fundamentally believe that everything good you have is freely given. That shift changes everything, from earning to receiving, from striving to resting in your inherent value.
The source digs into this, saying the one thing that is necessary is learning to be a receiver, to rest in the presence of this unconditional love, to treat the divine or life source as truly capable, not like a helpless infant needing our constant propping up or an employer demanding performance reports.
And this challenges that deep human urge to feel overly responsible for, well, everything, even things totally beyond our control, or things we might see as God's job. People carry such heavy burdens, thinking, if I don't do this evangelism, that person is doomed. But the source gently counters. It's divine work. God has plenty of ways, plenty of people. Remember Elijah? Thought he was the only faithful one left. God had to remind him, actually, I've got 7,000 others you don't even know about.
Yeah. The point is profound. God doesn't need us like we need air. He involves us because he loves us, wants relationship with us. If we operate out of complaint, obligation, feeling indispensable, he can easily raise up someone else, like Elisha stepping up from the plow. Understanding this frees us from that heavy burden, from that work for wages thinking that leads to burnout in parenting and work, everywhere, and crucially, steals the joy from children.
And it brings us right back around to that initial point about learning. Kids inherently love to learn. It's our performance demands, our conditional rewards, our work for wages approach that deprives them of the joy of learning. It crushes their natural curiosity.
Such a devastating irony. Okay, so this leads us into our final section. The path of grace, building a foundation for healthy relationships and inner peace. This part lays out 4 really practical core principles from the source material. A powerful counter-strategy to that whole law-based way of thinking.
The first one, echoing the Apostle Paul's experience, is strength and weakness. And this really challenges that standard advice we give kids and ourselves. Be strong, face challenges head on, you can do it. The source actually suggests this teaching, ironically, can make them weak because it puts the entire burden of success, of coping, squarely on their own shoulders. It demands this self-generated strength that's often just not sustainable, especially for kids. Jesus' words to Paul are key here. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. The application for parenting is huge. When a child is struggling, feeling weak, instead of just saying, you can do it, push harder. Maybe we could say something like, it's okay to feel weak. Unconditional love is enough for you right now. True strength often shows up right when we admit we can't do it alone. The paradox is we spend so much energy trying not to be weak, projecting strength. But the source says grace, real power, is manifested in human weakness. The more we can acknowledge our own limits, our vulnerability, and rely on that grace, the stronger we actually become, often in surprising ways. Paul even said he preferred to boast in his weaknesses, so that divine power could work through him. He became incredibly effective through his weakness, not despite it.
Okay, that leads to the second principle, which feels just as liberating. Not always needing to be correct. This comes from that promise in Romans. God causes all things to work together for good for those who love God. What a message for kids. Hey, you don't have to get everything right all the time.
It really is freeing. The source explains, this promise isn't conditional on us always making the perfect choice, always doing the right thing. Even our mistakes, our failures, the things we regret, this loving, purposeful force can weave even those into something beneficial in the long run, to ultimately display its own power and wisdom. Think about Joseph in the Old Testament. His brothers meant terrible harm to him, but looking back, you could say, you intended it for evil, but God intended it for good. The implication is staggering. A loving purpose knows our stumbles before they happen and has already factored them into the plan for our lives. Understanding that brings such deep rest. It frees us from that paralyzing fear of making mistakes, the fear that often holds us back from trying, from risking. Instead, it brings joy and peace, knowing that even our mess-ups can be redeemed and used for good.
And the third powerful truth, for kids and definitely for us adults too, you don't need to always condemn yourself. This is based on wisdom from the first letter of John, and it directly challenges that common parenting tactic of always finding fault to supposedly keep kids humble or motivated. You know, the kid gets 99% and the parent says, good, but why not 100? Keep working. Woo! As the source notes, that's using the law very skillfully, keeping the pressure on, but oh, the emotional cost.
But the counter from the source is so compassionate. If our hearts condemn us, God is greater than our hearts, and he knows everything. Meaning, that inner critic, that voice of guilt and shame, God is bigger than all of it. He's not shocked by our flaws or mistakes. He already knows them intimately. Think about the effect of self-condemnation. It's like trying to walk a tightrope while constantly telling yourself you're going to fall. The fear itself makes you more likely to stumble. In contrast, kids who feel encouraged, accepted even when they mess up, they always get better. Condemnation has never, ever truly made a child improve long-term. It just breeds fear, anxiety, maybe resentment. Unconditional love means forgiveness, always outweighs our self-condemnation. It outweighs the accusations of others. It outweighs our own anxious, self-righteous worries. It operates on that amazing principle where sin increased, grace increased all the more. So the fundamental command shifts. It's not follow these rules perfectly. It's believe in the source of unconditional love and love one another. That belief leads to internal transformation, not just outward compliance. Real rest, real confidence flows from that, creating a truly healthy state of life.
And the final liberating truth, number 4, comes straight from Jesus' words in Matthew. You don't need to always carry heavy burdens.
The source paints a picture of kids living under this crushing weight, often unspoken, living to please parents, living for what others think, living for face saving, for the family's reputation. All of that, whether it's explicit or just felt, makes life feel heady, like you're constantly carrying this huge backpack full of obligations and expectations. But Jesus offers this incredible alternative. My yoke is easy and my burden is light.
And the source uses that beautiful analogy to explain it. Jesus is like the strong, mature ox walking beside us, and we're the younger, less experienced calf yoked with him. He takes the main weight, he supports us, he guides the direction. It's his strength, not primarily ours, that allows us to move forward. It makes even difficult tasks feel lighter because we're not doing it purely out of duty or alone.
Think about Paul again. He felt compelled by God's love to preach, not driven by his own sense of obligation. It wasn't a burdensome have to. It was this joyful, almost unstoppable get to. The source shares a really moving personal story, finding deep, genuine joy and a sense of life's value in giving financial help to parents and in-laws. Why was it joyful? precisely because it wasn't a have to. It wasn't an obligation felt as a burden. It was a willing, grateful act flowing from a sense of abundance and love. The moment giving or serving feels like an obligation, the joy just evaporates and it becomes a heavy weight.
And this leads to such a powerful final thought on parenting from the source. It's about allowing our children to chase their dreams, the passions God put in their hearts, supported by our unconditional love and grace, rather than imposing our law-based definitions of success on them. Like, no, don't do that. This path makes more money, or this career looks better. The source argues that the pursuit itself, the joy of doing what you feel called to do, that is happiness. That's part of the divine design for us. True success isn't just hitting external markers, it's doing what you love.
And all of this rests on that foundational truth from John's Gospel, the vine and branches. Apart from me, you could do nothing. Nothing of lasting true value anyway. Believing that truth fundamentally removes worry because the pressure isn't all on us anymore. It shifts the burden from our limited abilities to an infinite source of strength. It means prioritizing, as the source puts it, mental health over grades. Recognizing that a child's inner well-being, their sense of peace and worth, is far more critical than any external performance metric. It's about choosing to live from the tree of life, representing dependence on grace, leading to peace and freedom rather than the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which focuses on self-reliance, judgment, comparison, and leads inevitably to worry, guilt, and unhealthy striving. And crucially, we need constant reminding of these truths. Just like David talked to his own soul in the Psalms, we need to keep bringing ourselves back to these principles. That's how we mature in grace.
So just to wrap up that incredible paradigm shift, instead of teaching kids and ourselves, be strong, take responsibility, perform better, which the source argues actually makes us weaker and more burdened in the long run. The path of grace teaches these liberating truths. Unconditional love is enough, especially in weakness. All things, even mistakes, can work for good. We don't need to condemn ourselves because forgiveness is bigger, and we don't need to carry those heavy burdens alone.
It's a complete flip, the total reimagining of where real strength, real joy, and real growth come from.
Yeah.
Not from performance, but from profound acceptance and grace.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, we've really traveled quite a distance, haven't we? From that simple 100 points for grilled chicken rice story, all the way to understanding just how deep and pervasive this law and performance thinking runs through our lives, often hidden in plain sight. We've seen how it can breed bitterness, anxiety, comparison, and this nagging feeling of never quite measuring up, whether it's at home, at work, or just inside our own heads.
And we've really explored how making that shift, consciously choosing a grace mindset, one based on unconditional love, acceptance, inherent worth, how that fundamentally changes everything. Our relationships, with our kids, parents, partners, friends, colleagues, but maybe most importantly, our relationship with ourselves. It transforms things from being about burden and striving and complaint into spaces of genuine joy, real peace, and authentic connection. The core message is just so powerful. Aim to be parents who raise children in grace, not like orphans struggling under the law. The source suggests this doesn't just create a happier family, but an immeasurable happiness, a freedom that ripples out into every part of life.
So, as you reflect on all this, maybe consider, where in your own life, in your relationships, might you be operating, maybe unconsciously, under that law of exchange, that work for wages mentality? Think about how you approach your own goals, maybe your expectations of others, or even how you determine your own self-worth day to day. What hidden burdens might you or the people around you be carrying because of it? And what might it actually look like, maybe starting small, to consciously choose to relate or give or even learn from a place of unconditional grace and love, instead of performance and obligation?
And maybe take that further. How might embracing your own perceived weaknesses, those areas where you feel you fall short, actually unlock a new kind of strength, a different kind of joy in what you do, just like the source suggests? What's one small step, maybe even today, you could take to consciously live more from that tree of life perspective? Finding peace in just receiving your value, and maybe extending that same grace, that same lack of judgment to someone else, rather than getting caught up in striving, comparison, and performance.
So what does this all mean for you?